Greetings and salutations, and thank you for clicking on this video. This is a deep dive into backups, Anacron, and automation, which means I'm going to sit here and ramble on about some of this stuff that we've been talking about in recent videos, because as I have done the videos, I have gone off and played around with the concepts that I presented, and I've come up with some new strategies that I want to share with you. This video is definitely for those of you who are real Linux fans and are familiar with the system, but if you're new to Linux and you stumble across it, watch it anyway, because you might get introduced to some concepts that you could use later on once you get up to speed and get a little bit more familiar with how the system works. Before we get into talking about the video itself, let me explain the noise that you might be hearing in the background. See this thing? It's a water tower, and it's across the street from my house. And there is a crew that has been working on that water tower since last fall, and they have this sand blaster going over there. When they get that thing cranked up, it sounds like I'm standing on the flight line at an Air Force base when they're taking off a whole flight of fighters, man. It's amazingly loud. So if you hear that, that's what's going on. And at the rate these guys are going, if they're going to strip all the paint off of the thing, they'll be doing this until next Christmas at least, because it's huge. So anyway, now that we've explained the noise, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about into the video. In the video. During the video. While the video is running. However you want to put that. I am insane about backups. When I did the video about Anacron, that was the example that I presented, was getting the system to do a backup. And since I have done that video, I've actually played around with that concept of getting the machine to do a backup on a daily basis. And it turns out that there's some stuff that I didn't get to present in that video that if you tried that and it didn't work, or if you were having problems, well, there's some reasons for that. And so as I go along here, it'd probably be like, oh, well, wait a minute, I can make that work. We talked about Anacron in that video. Anacron is available on any Ubuntu or Debian-based distribution of Linux. If you are running something like Manjaro or Arch Linux, anything Arch-based, Anacron is there, but it's not completely set up. The Arch folks have said that what they'd rather you do is set up a timer in systemd. We did videos about that as well, so you can check that out. It's really not that big of a difference between the two concepts, because either way you got to write a little script, and it's a file, and you stick it in the right place, and the system finds it, and it goes, ow, you know. So the first thing that I needed to do was kind of reassess my backup situation. I'm insane about backups. Long time ago, when I was programming automation systems for radio stations, I took this job, and I'd been there about a month, and I walked in one day and they told me the server's down. And I said, okay. So I went and looked at it. Turns out the server was dead. It just went bleh, and it took the hard drives with it. It was gone. I don't know what happened. Had a power surge in the night, or could have been any number of things. So I said, okay, where are the backups? And they looked at me and said, what backups? And I said, you guys have been backing everything up, right? No. Turns out the guy that had the job before I didn't really care that much about backups. So I spent the next 6 months rebuilding this system and having to replace a $40,000 server. It was a nightmare, let me tell you. So ever since then, I have been insane about keeping backups. And what I have been doing is pretty simple. I've been taking a external hard drive, plugging it in the machine, and using grsync or the rsync command from the command line to create a mirrored copy of whatever was going on in my home directory at that point in time. Of course, I'm also backing up other people's accounts that are on the computer. So it's not just me, but I'm also keeping up with Cindy's data and other things. And I took it to another level too, because I got a bunch of machines on this network. And so I wrote a program that allows me to type a command in, and it will do the same thing. It will sync all the files that are on my main machine over to any of these other computers. So if I sit down and get into my account in another computer, I'm up to date. I've got all the same stuff, even if I haven't actually physically used that machine in a long time. If that machine's up and running, then I do it through SSH, and that's a program that I put together, a little script called Sync It. Programs, scripts, whatever you want to call them. They do the same thing. Batch files. Now I've dated myself, going back to DOS. So anyway, I've got that going on. But then when we started doing the videos about Anacron, System D timers and all that, it got me thinking, how can I set up a local backup? And so I started goofing around with it. I started actually trying to get Anacron to do that. I ran into some head-scratching difficulties. And so I guess we'll start there. First of all, where we need to start is talking about the difference between an internal and an external backup, or a local backup. A local backup simply means that you have an extra hard drive stuck in the computer and that you are making copies of your data to that hard drive. This is better than having no backup at all, but it's not ideal because that local backup is subject to anything that would happen to that machine. If that machine gets struck by lightning, or lightning just strikes close, there is a chance that you could get a power surge that will fry everything in the computer, and if it gets your main drive, it'll get your backup drive too. So you can't really completely rely on that and say, oh, I'm all backed up. Still, it's nice to have around, especially, let's say, if your operating system goes and it dies, and the next thing you know, you have to reinstall. If you have a drive on the machine that was unaffected by that crash, no big deal. Reformat the other drive, move all your data back over, you're good to go. So it's kind of nice to have a local backup. An external backup is one that's on a device that is not physically connected to that machine. Now that could be an external hard drive, it could be a thumb drive, it could be cloud storage, you could be backing up there. I'm not a big fan of backing up in the cloud because I don't control it. I don't like that. I like to be able to be in total control of my backups. Don't take my backups away. And you know, there are some people that use some of these backup services, and I always scratch my head. It's like, yeah, it's cool and everything, but when it comes time to recover your data, how does that work, you know? So anyway, when I say external backup, it's just on some other device somewhere else. You could have a laptop somewhere, and you could use the network to copy your data over there, and that would function as a backup, even though it's a functioning machine, just as long as it's not to that device. The idea is to have as many copies of anything that you want to keep there is, because stuff happens. Hard drives fail, you might get a virus, anything. You could lose that. So if you only got one copy of something, you might as well just say, well, I could lose this any minute. So between doing the external backups and then syncing between all the machines, I thought I was pretty well covered. But I thought it would be nice to do an internal backup and set that up. So here's what I did. The first thing that we need to look at is a script that I did to take care of this. Now I can use grsync to do exactly the same thing, but this way I only have to type in one command, enter, I'm done. And then the machine does it automatically. So let's take a look at that script. I'm going to jump into my bin folder, and then I'm going to, let's use Nano today, Nano, and the name of the script that we're going to look at first is XB. So all I got to do is type in XB, and this does an external backup. So let me explain a little bit about what's going on. First line here is just sending some information to a log file, and that information, this way I can let this run. I don't have to really pay any attention to it, and then I can go back and check to make sure it went okay. So the first line that we have is saying what kind of backup it is. Do an external backup. And then the next one, it just puts this line in the log file, and that line, then the next line is the date, and what that does is gives me a timestamp. So every time that I fire off this command, it tells me what's in there. And then we have just an echo here that tells me on the screen what the thing is doing, and then we use an rsync command to back up the home directory, or first one is the etc directory. Got a lot of configuration files in there that I have customized, so I want to keep those. And then the next one is the home directory. This is the same command. We're just using rsync. And essentially what I'm telling rsync to do is we're using the A attribute, which tells it just make an exact copy. If anything's changed, delete that on the backup. So this is a backup that is not like where if you add something to the computer and then you delete something else, some backups, the way they work is they don't delete anything, so they just keep updating. This is an incremental backup, which means that every time I run it, I get an exact snapshot of what's going on in the home directory or etc here. And then it goes to Media Joe WD Backup, and then there's a folder on there called Home Backup. And then you see this funky little guy right here. What this does is it takes the output from rsync. If there are any errors, it takes the output of that and puts it all in one stream. See, because the way that Linux shows you things on the screen when you're running commands is that there are two channels that a program can use. One is called standard in, stdin, or excuse me, standard out, std out. Standard in is what you feed the program with. Standard out will print things on the screen, and then there's another one called standard error, and they're in two different channels of output, because if you have a situation like what we got here where you have something running and it's dumping its output into a log file, you might not see that on the screen, but you might want to see errors. Well, this little command right here, this little doohickey, what it does is it takes both of those channels and puts it into one, and then the T command takes the output that's going to the screen and dumps it into the file. And then we have a little fancy box that comes up at the bottom, and it shows you the fact that it's done. Now, yeah, I know, guys, I could use a different way of doing that. You can get the echo command to do a bunch of data, but that's actually more typing than just doing these lines for these short scripts. And once it's done its job and everything's cool, it takes that backup file that I created and it dumps it onto the external drive. And then down here we have exit, and the exit is really not necessary, but I like to do it. It just, if anything hangs up, that tells the shell to go ahead and kill the program, and it won't be hanging around in the background. So there you go. That's the basic script that we started out with, and this script will, when I plug any USB drive that's called WD Backup, and actually I had two of them, so I know I'm crazy. I know I got a backup from a backup, and if I plug it in here and then I type in this command, it just goes through and makes this copy. That's cool. So that's no problem. Now, I've showed you in the past how to do that with grsync, which is a nice program that you can do the same stuff here. It's just GUI based, and you just click boxes and stuff like that. So whatever works for you is cool. So I started with this script, and then I thought, well, I need to do a local backup, which is the reason why I had to add this line, because there are differences. So let's go take a look at the local backup. Let me get out of here. Now, I got real creative when I named this. This one's just called LB for local backup. So let's open that up. And you see it looks pretty similar, but we do have some changes. So first of all, here it's going to say local backup. So when it creates the log file, it's going to tell me what kind of backup it is, and then here's the timestamp stuff, and then the same stuff we saw before. And then we get down here, and then you see we got some extra things with the rsync command. So let's start out with this one, this --bw limit equals 50,000. What is that? Well, that is a bandwidth limit. Hey, I said it. And that keeps the rsync command from taking up all of the bandwidth that's available on the devices on my computer. You can also use this over the network. So if you're using rsync to send data over an SSH connection to another machine, and your uplink is completely clogged up and now you can't do anything else with the computer, you can use that bandwidth limit to do that. You can also do it with local devices, because when I first started doing this command to do a local backup, I didn't have any limit in there at all. I didn't think I needed it. But what happens is that if this thing's running in the background, the rest of the system just bogs completely down, because the entire SATA bus is just overwhelmed. I've got two Western Digital Caviar Black drives in here, and they're very fast spinning drives, 7,200 RPMs. They're really some of the best hard drives you can buy. And so I'm reading from one and then I'm writing to another, and it's like they get into this mode where it's like, hey, I'm too busy to do anything else on the system. So that's why there's a bandwidth limit there. And for those of you who understood that, and you're probably going, why'd you take so long to explain it? It's because some people don't notice stuff. And then we use the A attribute again, which means just archive everything, make an exact copy, delete, and the rest of it is pretty much the same. So if I'm sitting here and I want to create a local backup, then all I got to do is open up a terminal, type in LB, and turn it loose. So that's the basic backup system on the computer. I can do an external backup or I can do an internal backup. Well, the nice thing about having a local backup is that I can automate it, because I don't have to worry about the drive being plugged in, the external drive, and fired up. If the machine is going to decide, hey, now's the time to do this, and that's not there, then it's going to end in an error and it's just going to die. It's not going to work. But with a hard drive that's part of the system as my backup, then no problem, right? So let's go ahead and get out of here, and then I want to show you how I set that up. So if you saw my Anacron video, you remember how it works. Anacron is a service that runs on your system, and it will do things hourly, daily, weekly, or monthly. And to get it to work, you have to write a little script, and you have to throw it in this particular directory in etc. And whatever you put in there, it'll try and run. That's the Reader's Digest version. So let's go to etc. Do it right. Okay, and then we're going to look for a directory called cron weekly, or cron daily, because I want to show you the backup in there. And so we do, what am I doing? Oh, we're changing the directory. Okay. Duh. Okay, cron daily, list the storage, and now you see that we have a script in here called zbackup. Zbackup tells the system whenever it boots up, it's about 5 minutes after it boots up. Okay, if I shut it down at night and then I bring it back up in the morning, it notices that the date has changed and it says, oh, this is daily, I need to do this. So about 5 minutes after the machine's awake, it runs all these jobs. Now all of these other jobs that are in here are already set up by the system, and when I want this thing to back up, I want it to be the last thing it does in this list of stuff. So go ahead and get all this taken care of and then run my backup, because this backup is going to take a lot longer to run. So let's take a look at this script. It's really, there's not much to it, and we'll talk about some of the differences in how it works here. So let's see, what program do I want to show my script in? Let's just do Nano. Always get confused. There's about 14 different ways to display things. And let's see here. So we have a very short, very simple script, and the first command here is set E. Now what that does is anything that runs in cron or Anacron, or even as a timer for systemd, it is running very deep down into the system. You do not have any way to interact with this. If it comes across an error, really what you want the thing to do is just stop working. Okay, you want it to quit. Don't even try and do it. I'll look at the log later. I'll see that you didn't run it, and I'll try and figure out what's going on. But don't halt the system, and don't leave a process hung up in the background. Don't do anything goofy. So with this little command here, this set E, basically what it tells the sh shell to do is, instead of continuing if it comes across an error, it just says abort, quit, stop, don't. That's the way that is being used. And then we always have to have a little comment to say what the script does. And then we have a one-line command here, and it starts with exec. Now, it took me a little while to figure out why they were using that, but what that does is when you preface a command with exec in a script, it keeps it all in one process, and it doesn't allow that command to fork off and start doing other stuff in other processes, which is also something that you really want Anacron to do, because each one of these jobs is going to become a process. So whatever you call up for this thing to do, you want to kind of keep it there so that the system is not spawning 14 million different processes. And then I'm having it run that LB that I just showed you, and then this little bunch of stuff, lovely things right here, takes all the output from that LB command, all of the stuff that you'd ordinarily see on the screen, and it throws it into dev null, which is the bit bucket. And then I'm telling it to take everything that this command generates, errors, whatever. We see this 2 redirected into 1, okay, right there. That's what that's doing. It's saying, okay, take any output from that command, whether it be standard out or error, throw it in dev null. Thank you. So we don't have anything on the screen. There's a reason for that. Any job that you run in cron or Anacron, if there's any output from any of the commands that you'd ordinarily see on the screen, it's going to generate mail. And it's going to send it to system mail. Who reads system mail these days? That is from the old days of mainframes when everybody who had an account had a local email account on the machine. We don't really do that anymore. We run Linux on our desktops and our laptops and all this other stuff. And of course, I like to end a script with exit. So that's that little script. So when you make these scripts, there's a couple of things that you really want to do. Don't do that. Let me get out of here. No, I don't want to save. I want you to leave because I didn't mean to do that anyway. So let's take a look at some things about these little scripts. First of all, you do have that funky syntax. You want to, if you have any more than one command you want to put in here, you want to make sure that you're calling another script somewhere because it really can only do one thing at a time when it's running in the Anacron mode. You'll also notice that my Z backup script, it's owned by root. I mean, I didn't just set this executable. I made this script actually owned by the root user. Now, I don't know whether you have to do that or not, but when Anacron runs, it sets up its own environment. And it's run as the root user, by the root user, for the root user. So I figured that if that's going to cause any heartburn, then I would do that and get rid of that. So how does Anacron keep up with what it's doing? So if you're going to do all this, how do you test it? And I didn't really show this in the last video, so let's do that now. Okay, so Anacron, usually on Debian systems, you'll have daily, weekly, and monthly set up. And let's just jump over to var, and then I want to go to spool, and then I want to go into Anacron. It would help if you complete it. Thank you. Now it knows where to look. So let's look in here and see what we got. So we'll list the storage there. We got 3 files: cron daily, cron monthly, cron weekly. All these files are timestamps. The initiating script for Anacron that goes and finds all the jobs and does everything it needs to do, it creates a timestamp. That's the first thing it does. And so if you want to test Anacron, let's say that you put something in cron daily and you want to make it work. Now there are some commands that you can run from the terminal that will force it to do supposedly what it's supposed to do. But actually for cron daily, the easiest way to test and make sure that your stuff is working is to we'll just use less, and let's look at cron daily, and if I spell it right it would work great. Okay, so you see here it's nothing but it's just a timestamp. So what you could do if you wanted to make cron run again, I'll just go ahead and do it so I can show you. Oh, permission denied. Yeah, duh, dummy. That's because it's owned by root and you're not the root user and you weren't paying attention and you thought that it put out that timestamp and it really didn't. So why don't you stop talking and start looking at the screen, dummy. There we go. There we go. Okay, so now that you see what's in that file is nothing but a timestamp. So what you can do is you can edit that. Let me get out of less. So sudo nano cron daily. There we go. You're getting it. Alright, so all I have to do if I want to just make cron run again the next time I reboot the system, tell it hasn't run in like 2 months. Control O. Save it, exit. So the next time the system reboots, it'll go, oh, I've got a daily job I haven't run in 3 months. I better take care of that. What if your system is up and running all the time? Well, what happens then is it'll run at 7:30 in the morning. So if the system is up and running at 7:30, it'll go and see if it's got any jobs to do. That's how Anacron works, and that's a little bit more of a deep dive into what Anacron does. So we've talked about backup scripts, we've talked about Anacron. What else did I want to talk about in this rambling video? Well, let me show you what I did to create my local backup. because you might find that quite interesting. So why don't you clear the screen, get rid of all that stuff. And we'll go back to the home directory, clear it again. Now we got a nice blank slate to start with. So my original setup on this machine was that I had a really small hard drive that I was using for the system, which is like 160 gigabytes. And then I have a terabyte drive that I was using for home. So to create a space to back up, what I could have done, I'm only dealing with like 200 gigabytes of data that I'm keeping up with. So I could very well have created another partition on this drive and used it as backup, but I got a bunch of these 1 terabyte drives, Caviar Black, really fast, and the drive that I was using for the system partition, it was kind of slow. It was a 5400 RPM drive, so I thought, well, hey, I can copy everything that's on that system partition over to one of these new drives, and I'll still have a bunch of space left over. So that's exactly what I did. I used the DD command, and I told it take everything on this drive and put it on this other drive. I booted the machine off of a boot disk and then just used DD to do that. So if you want to know how powerful DD is, you can go look that up. It's an awesome command. So this left me a bunch of space after the here's the system partition right here. It's 141 something gigabytes. Then we got 8 gigabytes of swap, because this is an old system. This is Ubuntu, well, it's Linux Mint 17.3, so it has Ubuntu 14.04 as a base, so still creating swap partitions. That's fine, no problem. And then this part right here, I made backup. And so then what I did to give myself access to it was I created a folder in the root directory for it. So if we list the storage here, you see that I now have this directory or folder called backup. And so this is because you can't really back up an entire home directory within the home directory. So it's got to be somewhere else on the system, right? So what I did with that is I made that directory when I installed it. This is actually mine. So if we do that, and then now let's just do, we'll do the long version. Just scroll up, and you can see here. So the first thing that you see, it's owned by me. It's not everything else in this, the root directory is owned by root, but this is mine. So I have full access to this, which is really cool. And then I just put this in fstab so that I would be able to load it up when the machine boots up. So we can take a look at that too. Fstab. Okay, so when the system boots up, this last line that you're seeing right here is grabbing this new partition that I created, and then it is mounting it into the backup directory. And also I set it up so this gets checked when the system boots up too. So it's getting checked with the what is the thing called in Linux? I want to say check disk, but that's Windows, isn't it? No, it's not Windows, man. It's well, whatever the file system checker is called in Linux. I'm having a mental block on it right now. Check disk. It is file system FSCK, file system check. That's the name of that utility. Duh. I'm telling you, man, with this jet engine running all the time across the street, my brain's like messed up. It doesn't work because it's like I think I'm going to have to get me a hotel until they finish doing this. Anyway, back to the subject. This automatically mounts that backup partition, so it's always available to the system. So that's where I'm putting it. And I had a strange thing happen when I went to set this up, because I only did the drive swap yesterday. I was using a partition somewhere else, and I thought, well, I'm going to take advantage of these fast drives and use it. The strangest thing happened. So the DD command, what it does is it copies one device to another. So you can take 2 hard drives, and then you can make exact copies. They don't exactly have to be the exact same size either. The first hard drive needs to be smaller than the next hard drive. So as an example for DD, you would do the command like this. You'd do sudo, and it has to be run as root. And of course, these drives cannot be mounted up, so you can't like do this to your own drive that the machine's running on. So if you're going to be working with your system drive like I was, then you'd have to boot the machine off of a live USB or something and then do it in the terminal there so you can have access. So it would be like if I wanted to take dev sta, which is my main drive, if I wanted to take that and I want to move that over to another drive, it would be if equals dd if equals, that's the input file, equals dev sda, and then the output file equals, if I plugged in my drive, let's say my drive showed up as SDB. You got to make sure you know exactly which device you're working with, because you could blow out one that was that you didn't want to. So if you just ran this command just like this, and you don't have to put anything over here. You don't have, well, you could tell it a block size. So in this case, let's do the block size of 1024. You could pretty much use anything. What it's going to do is it's going to copy that drive over. So I did that yesterday. Now this should take everything with it. Bootloaders, any partitions, doesn't make any difference. It's an exact one-to-one copy. When I first went to boot up off the drive that I had made the copy on, the machine wouldn't boot up. And I thought, well, that's supposed to work, man. That's supposed to take every bit of data that's on that drive and make an exact clone of it. Why didn't that work? Well, I didn't have time to fool with it, so I actually put everything back the way it was, took the drive that I was working with and put it away. And I got to thinking about it later, and I said, I can fix that, because if the grub bootloader didn't get installed, then I can just install it myself, right? No big deal. There's a way to do that from a live environment. You use a live environment, and then you reinstall, you change root, and then you reinstall the grub bootloader. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to do that. So I plugged the drive that I had been working with in to the same slot that was the boot drive was in. I started the machine, and I didn't move fast enough to get to F12 to get to the boot menu to choose the boot device, and it booted. And it booted off the drive that I had made the copy to. That one I never could figure out, but for those of you who are long-time computer geeks, that may be one that it didn't work first time, I swear to God, and then it worked. Then I put the drive away, let it cool for a while, plugged it back in, and it worked. So anyway, I was doing that yesterday, and I found that to be quite interesting. Alright, gang, I have rambled on enough. Thank you for listening to my ramble. I certainly do appreciate it. I just think it's fun every now and again to do these kind of videos where I talk about some of the stuff that I've been playing around with and introduce you to some of the things that, because when I do these videos, a lot of times I'll go off and think about it, and I'll go, wait a minute, how does that really work? And I'll deep dive into it. So this time around, I took you with me. So thank you for watching. Your comments and suggestions are always welcome. Check out Easy Linux on Facebook. We got a hip and happening thing going on over there. Check out Easy Linux on the web. If you want to contact me directly, there's a contact form there that you can fill out, and I will get the message via email. And also check out freedompenguin.com for lots of great stories about Linux, because a lot going on in the Linux world, and it's been kind of fun to look at those. And there's a lot of really practical how-to stuff, kind of like what I'm doing here. As a matter of fact, I need to write something for Freedom Penguin, but I have writer's block. I don't know what to write. What can I put on Freedom Penguin? I need your help. Tell me what to put on Freedom Penguin. Use the comments below. Alright, gang, I'm done. Thanks for watching. Talk to you again soon.